So how was your week? I hope your week was better than mine, but it's another weekend, so it's time for us to take a look at another interesting research paper. And today we're going to take a look at this one, sight over sound. So first let me describe to you their main findings, and then we're going to take a closer look at this paper. So very simply put, what the researcher did in this study was that they played classical music competition clips to people and asked them to guess who the winner was. The experiment had 3 different conditions. For some people, the researcher played the full video clip with both visuals and sound. For some other people, the researcher played the video clip with no sound. And for the third condition, there was only sound, there was no visuals. So guess which condition was the best at guessing who the winner was? It was the silent video group. Isn't that surprising? Because we're talking about guessing winners at classical music performance competitions, so we would think sound should matter more than looks. But it didn't. For the test subjects who could only hear the sound, they did statistically worse than chance in terms of guessing who the winner was. For those who could both see and hear, they did about as well as chance. And for those who were shown the silent video clips, well, they did statistically better than chance. And this pattern of findings held true for both laymen and professional musicians. That's interesting, that's surprising, that's counterintuitive. So let's take a look at this paper closely. So the first thing that the researcher did was that they asked people for self-report answers. Basically, people were asked, if you had to judge the quality of classical musical performances, which is more important, sound or looks? And according to people's self-reports, sound is so much more important than visuals, and this held true for both novices and experts. So for both a layperson and a professional musician, they both say that they consider sound to be much more important than visuals when it comes to judging the quality of classical music performances. And then there were these experiments. So the researcher played video clips of the top 3 contestants from 10 prestigious international classical music competitions to these people, or these test subjects, to see whether or not they can guess who the actual winner was. And as I indicated earlier, the test subjects were randomly divided into 3 groups: those who could only see, those who could only hear, and those who could both see and hear. The researcher repeated these experiments several times for both novices and professional musicians, and the findings are quite clear. For people in the condition where they can only hear the sound, their accuracy was lower than chance, meaning they did quite poorly. For people who could both see and hear, they did about as well as chance, which is not that good. The only group which did statistically better than chance was the group of people who were shown silent video clips, who could see the performance but couldn't hear anything. It turns out that these people were the most accurate in identifying the actual winning performers in these prestigious international classical music competitions. And these findings were robust enough that they held true for both laymen and professional musicians. The researcher was also interested in trying to identify the mechanisms through which sight played such a key role in perceiving winning music performers. In the final experiment included in this paper, participants were asked to identify different visual features that contributed to their evaluations of the music performers, and analyses showed the following visual elements to be significant. It would appear that people really liked players who appeared to be passionate, involved, creative, motivated, and unique in their performances. In other words, if you are a performer and you can perform in a way that make you seem like you are passionate, involved, creative, motivated, and unique, well, people are going to think you are a good performer. And this might actually explain why some classical piano instructors these days are not just teaching students the pieces, they are also instructing the students how to move their body with music, how to move their head and their arms and manipulate their facial expressions and all those things. Now, some people might criticize these instructors, but it seems like that they might actually have a good reason for teaching those things or incorporating those elements in their instructions, because it seems like those things do matter. Look, personally, I am not a big fan of Long Long's piano performances because I find his body movements and his facial expressions to be a little bit exaggerated, to be a bit distracting. I'd much rather listen to his performances instead of watching them. But I can imagine there are people who really enjoy watching Long Long's performances because of his body movements, because of his facial expressions, because those things make his performance seem creative, passionate, involved, and unique. And our reliance, and in some cases over-reliance on visual cues might also explain why we would feel very different when watching certain politicians talk versus when only listening to their voice recordings versus when reading their transcript. We might not realize it, but there is so much that we take in through visual cues. Anyway, so in conclusion, this very nice paper raises a few very interesting points that we might not have thought about before. First, this study shows that we rely on visual cues for things that we might not even think looks are relevant, like judging the quality of classical music performances. Because according to people's self-reports, when they're asked what matters more, sound or looks, for classic music performances, people actually said overwhelmingly sound matters more than sight. But as it turns out, despite what people might say or believe, sound didn't matter so much. People still relied more on sight. So this is why people still fall in love at first sight, why we say out of sight, out of mind, why we still judge a book by its cover, why good-looking vloggers have millions of subscribers and ugly people like me have only 15,000 at this point. The second interesting thing that this study showed is that there were no differences between professional musicians and non-experts in their tendency to rely on visual cues, which is good to know. And finally, this paper explained why visual cues are so persuasive for evaluating the quality of classical music performances. They were able to identify several visual features which contributed to people's perception of quality: passion, motivation, creativity, involvement, and uniqueness. So these things are also good to know, because for those of you who didn't know this, I have a music channel, I'll link it up. The next time I record music, I'm gonna try to fake it better. You know, fake it before you make it. How do I fake it? Well, passion, motivation, involvement, uniqueness, creativity. That's how I'm gonna be faking it next time. All right, so all in all, interesting paper. So next week, we're gonna take a look at another interesting research paper. Have a great week, and I'll see you next weekend.